Regina Mayor, global head of energy at KPMG. A couple of days ago, the head of the International Energy Agency predicted a bumpy ride for the oil price this year, volatility in the markets. And do you agree with that statement?
I think it depends on your definition of volatility. I do expect that we will see fluctuations in the price. I do expect, however, that it will stay between 50 and 60. So it depends on what is the definition of volatility and how much of a decrease or an increase does that mean. We will see supply and demand coming back into balance. We will see some stability around the $55 benchmark for Brent. But then we'll see, U.S. shale producers will increase production. We've already seen rig counts go up week over week for the 10 straight weeks. That would push the price back down. Something will happen with OPEC or something else will happen in the world and that will push prices back up. So we will see some fluctuations. My definition is that's not volatility, and frankly the industry gets quite comfortable in a 50 to 60 scenario that they can live with. It's profitable and they can make reasonable margins on almost all types of hydrocarbon exploration and production.
Now, given political and geopolitical changes now, for example in the US or in Russia, do you think oil in general will become more important again?
I'm from Houston, Texas, and I personally think oil has and will continue to be very important. It's a key part of our energy mix, and it's not going away soon. I do think, though, we're seeing more energy security and energy stability with the sources of oil that we found, as well as seeing more from natural gas coming more into play, and the growth of renewables. When we look at some of the renewable developments, other types of technologies are coming into play. Geothermal, getting more ready for prime time, offshore wind, and other sources. So I believe oil continues to be very important, but I think gas and the other renewables will continue to eke away at oil's market share and will become increasingly important in the coming years.
So what about nuclear energy? Because it's also been said one of the energies that are on its way out. But Switzerland, for example, voted to retain nuclear energy for the time being. Does it have a future?
I'm personally a nuclear fan, and I think it's actually quite wise that Switzerland made the move that it made. I worry, frankly, that the U.S. is being quite premature in some of the early nuclear plant retirements. It's significant infrastructure that's already in place. It's a carbon neutral source of energy. It continues to be incredibly a powerful provider of electricity, and you've got small scale nuclear too, where you can deal with nuclear waste and you can have small scale types of plants, and you can minimize the total risk. I'm a personal believer that nuclear needs to continue to be a big part of the equation for at least the next several decades, and I think that what Switzerland has done is quite a smart move, in fact.
You mentioned renewables. Now, there are, of course, some disruptive trends, also looking to the future. What do you think are the most important of these, looking to the next years?
One of the interesting disruptors that we're seeing is the rise of the electric vehicle and what that ends up meaning for gasoline and refined products. And we talk to a lot of our refinery clients, and when you look at things like the demographics, millennials and how they're choosing to drive, the urbanization on the part of the baby boomers who are aging and probably not driving as much, the rise of the ride-sharing platforms, and the rise of the electric vehicle, I see that as the biggest disruptor to the downstream part of the value chain. On the power generation side, there are lots of disruptors with great technologies coming into play. I already mentioned a few, but the offshore wind, as I mentioned, there's some interesting carbon capture and carbon regeneration types of power generation technologies that are coming into play. And I don't think we've even seen what the major disruptors are for power generation that will come into place in the next 5 to 10 years.
Now, Davos is also always a place where people talk about sustainability, about clean technology and other things. Do you believe Davos is still a place for bold thinking?
Absolutely, and it's a great place where different minds come together and challenge each other with their thinking. Sustainability and new technologies will continue to be a part of what drives the energy industry, and Davos is a nice hotbed for developing those technologies. But candidly, we're seeing technology development in places we never would have dreamed that they would come, Silicon Valley, for example, and the convergence of different players into traditional spaces, right? Automotive companies becoming more like high-tech companies, what Tesla is doing with the energy industry. All of that is changing. They're all major disruptors. Davos creates a great opportunity to just reflect, think forward, and try to imagine what the future might look like in the next decade.
Regina Mayor, thank you very much for your insight.